In small-town Riverbrook, a simple act of cruelty ignited an unexpected revolution. When Officers Barnes and Kyle targeted a homeless black veteran at the Red Rail Diner, they couldn't have known Eli Turner's military connections ran straight to the Pentagon. One phone call from a brave waitress set in motion a chain of events that would expose a nationwide conspiracy targeting homeless veterans, topple corrupt police departments, and transform communities across America. The cops who tossed aside Eli's dog tags never realized they weren't just harassing a nameless vagrant. They were awakening a warrior who had already survived far worse than anything they could inflict. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. Snow fell in gentle waves over the quiet streets of Riverbrook, painting the small town in pristine white. Few people braved the cold this evening, hustling from storefront to car with hunched shoulders and hurried steps. Among them walked Eli Turner, his pace unhurried despite the biting wind. An old military jacket hung from his broad shoulders, worn but meticulously clean, with a faded U.S. flag patch sewn onto the sleeve. His pants were frayed at the edges, his boots cracked from years of wear, but there was a dignity in his bearing that contradicted his rough appearance. Eli's breath fogged in the cold air as he spoke softly to himself. Check the exits. Identify the threats. Maintain situational awareness. The words were part ritual, part memory. Mantras from another life that kept his mind focused when the world seemed determined to push him to its margins. A neon sign flickered ahead. Red Rail Diner. Open 24 hours. Through frosted windows, Eli could see the glow of warmth and the silhouettes of people enjoying hot meals. His stomach tightened with hunger. The monthly Veterans Assistance check had come in yesterday, small as it was, and tonight he could afford a proper meal. He paused before the entrance, brushing snow from his shoulders and straightening his posture. It had been 3 days since he'd been inside a proper building, 3 days of huddling in the abandoned railway station on the edge of town, keeping warm with salvaged newspapers and memories of desert heat. The bell above the door jingled as Eli stepped inside. The rush of warmth and the smell of coffee and grilled food enveloped him. For a moment he closed his eyes, savoring the sensation. When he opened them again, the diner had fallen silent. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Forks hovered above plates. Eyes darted toward him, then quickly away. A young mother pulled her child closer. An elderly man glanced nervously at his wallet on the table and slipped it into his pocket. Eli had seen this before, too many times. He chose an empty stool at the counter, one with clear sight lines to both the front door and the kitchen exit. Old habits. Just passing through, he murmured to no one in particular. Just looking for a hot meal. Rachel Miller had been working at the Red Rail for almost 2 years now, saving for community college while trying to support her younger brother through his rookie year at the police academy. At 23, she'd seen enough to know the signs of the down and out. But something about this man's eyes, clear, alert, and somehow ancient, made her hesitate. She glanced toward the corner booth where Officers Barnes and Kyle sat nursing their coffees. They came in every Tuesday like clockwork, staying through most of her shift. Barnes caught her gaze and raised an eyebrow, nodding subtly toward Eli. Rachel steadied her hands and approached the counter. "Can I get you something, sir?" she asked, sliding a menu toward Eli. "Coffee, please. Black." His voice was deep but gentle, unexpectedly articulate. "And whatever's the special today, if it's not too much trouble, ma'am." Ma'am, not honey or sweetheart like most of the regulars called her. Rachel found herself smiling slightly as she poured his coffee. "Meatloaf with mashed potatoes and gravy," she said. "Comes with green beans and a roll." "That sounds perfect. Thank you." Eli wrapped his calloused hands around the warm mug. "Been a while since I had a home-cooked meal." From the corner booth, Officer Kyle snickered loudly. "Dumpster diving doesn't count as dining out, huh?" he said, voice pitched just loud enough to carry across the diner. Officer Barnes chuckled and added, "Better keep the silverware count, Rachel. And check the bathroom after he leaves. These bums always shoot up when they get inside somewhere warm." Eli didn't turn around. He kept his eyes on his coffee, his expression unchanged, save for a slight tightening around his eyes. Rachel felt her face grow hot with embarrassment, but years of customer service had trained her to keep smiling, to pretend she hadn't heard. "I'll put that order right in," she said to Eli, turning toward the kitchen. "Thank you, ma'am," Eli repeated, his voice still steady. Officer Kyle stood up, stretching ostentatiously before sauntering to the counter. He was in his mid-30s, with a linebacker's build gone slightly soft, and a perpetual smirk that Rachel had always found unsettling. His partner Barnes followed a step behind, thinner, sharper, with cold eyes that missed nothing. "Hey, Rachel." Kyle leaned against the counter, deliberately taking the stool next to Eli. "How's that brother of yours doing at the academy? Still planning to join the force?" "He's doing great," Rachel answered, keeping her voice neutral. "Top of his class in marksmanship." "Good man," Kyle nodded. "We need good officers, ones who understand what it takes to keep a community safe." He turned his head slightly, looking at Eli's profile. "You know what that means, right? Keeping the dangerous elements off the streets. The druggies, the panhandlers, the so-called vets who use their service as an excuse to beg and harass honest citizens." Eli took a slow sip of his coffee. "You'd be surprised," Barnes added, taking the stool on Eli's other side, effectively boxing him in. "How many of these homeless heroes never saw a day of actual combat? But they sure know how to work the system, don't they, Kyle?" "Damn right," Kyle agreed. "Real soldiers come home, get jobs, and contribute to society, not like these parasites." Rachel returned with Eli's food, setting the plate in front of him with hands that trembled slightly. "Can I get you gentlemen anything else?" she asked the officers, trying to redirect their attention. "Nah, we're good," Kyle replied, then reached for the sugar dispenser. He tossed a packet onto Eli's plate, where it landed next to the meatloaf. "Here you go, buddy. Earn your keep. Dance for your dinner. Isn't that how it works for you people?" A tense silence fell over the diner. Several patrons shifted uncomfortably. A teenage boy in the back booth surreptitiously pulled out his phone and began recording. Eli set down his coffee with deliberate care. He picked up the sugar packet between two fingers, turned in his seat, and placed it gently back on the officer's table. "I earned my dignity in Kandahar," he said quietly, "and I don't need to earn it again from you." The air in the diner seemed to freeze. Kyle's face flushed dark red, and Barnes's hand drifted instinctively toward his holster. "You threatening an officer, vagrant?" Barnes asked, his voice dangerously soft. "No, sir," Eli replied, turning back to his meal. "Just having dinner." Kyle stood abruptly, his stool scraping loudly against the floor. "I think you need to leave. You're disturbing the peace." Eli didn't move. "I've paid for this meal, and I intend to eat it." The man said leave. Barnes joined in, standing now too. "Or are you refusing to comply with a lawful order?" Rachel stepped forward. "Officers, please. He's not causing any trouble. He's just—" "Stay out of this, Rachel." Barnes cut her off. "Unless you want trouble too. Your brother wouldn't appreciate his big sister interfering with police business, would he?" The threat hung in the air, clear and cold. Rachel stepped back, her face pale, but her hand slipped into her apron pocket, where her phone was already recording. Kyle grabbed Eli's shoulder roughly. "On your feet now." Eli remained seated, but met Kyle's gaze directly. His eyes were calm but unflinching. "I have the right to finish the meal I paid for. I have not broken any laws. Disturbing the peace, refusing to comply with an officer, threatening behavior," Barnes listed off. "That's 3 strikes, buddy." Around the diner, more phones had appeared. Silent witnesses to the escalating scene. No one spoke, no one intervened. 3 tours in Afghanistan, Eli said evenly. 2 Purple Hearts, a Silver Star, and I can't even eat dinner in peace in the country I served. Kyle yanked Eli's arm hard, nearly pulling him off the stool. "Save the sob story for someone who cares. Hero." As the officers began to forcibly remove him, Eli looked directly at Rachel. His expression was resigned, but determined. "If something happens to me," he said clearly, ensuring she could hear, "call General Whitaker at the Pentagon. Tell him Eli Turner is in trouble. Rachel's eyes widened. Was this homeless man delusional? Did he really think he had connections at the Pentagon? Barnes laughed harshly. Yeah, and I've got the president on speed dial. Let's go, Turner. They dragged Eli toward the door, his feet barely touching the ground. He didn't resist, didn't struggle, but maintained his dignity even as they manhandled him through the diner. Back to your meals, folks, Kyle called over his shoulder. Just taking out the trash. The diner's door swung open, letting in a blast of cold air. Rachel hurried after them, staying in the doorway as they dragged Eli across the parking lot and slammed him against their patrol car with unnecessary force. Eli grunted in pain, but remained silent as they roughly patted him down. The chain around his neck caught on Barnes's watch, and his dog tags clattered to the snowy ground. Kyle deliberately stepped on them, then kicked them aside with a smirk. Oops, he said, shoving Eli into the back seat. Guess you're not such a hero after all. The cruiser's door slammed shut. The engine started with a roar, and the patrol car pulled away, disappearing into the swirling snow. Rachel stood shivering in the doorway for a long moment. Then she hurried into the parking lot, searching until she found Eli's dog tags half buried in the snow. The metal was cold against her palm as she brushed away the ice crystals to read the embossed text. Turner, Elijah J. O. Paz, Methodist. Her phone felt heavy in her pocket. The recording was still running. With trembling fingers, she pulled it out and stopped the video. Then, taking a deep breath, she unlocked her phone again and whispered, "Please don't be crazy." Back inside the Red Rail diner, Rachel huddled in the employee bathroom, her hands still shaking. She stared at her phone screen. The Pentagon's main number pulled up and ready to dial. This was insane. What was she doing? Calling the Pentagon because some homeless man told her to? She'd probably get laughed at or worse, get in trouble for wasting government time. But the look in Eli's eyes haunted her. The quiet dignity. The way he hadn't fought back. And those dog tags now tucked safely in her pocket felt like a weight of responsibility. Just do it, she whispered to herself, and pressed the call button. The line rang 3 times before a professional female voice answered. Department of Defense, how may I direct your call? Rachel swallowed hard. I need to speak with General Whitaker, please. It's about Eli Turner. He's in trouble. A pause. One moment, please. Rachel expected to be disconnected or redirected to voicemail. Instead, after a series of clicks and transfers, a new voice came on the line. This is Colonel Reynolds, General Whitaker's aide. Who am I speaking with? My name is Rachel Miller. I'm calling from Riverbrook. I was told to contact General Whitaker if Eli Turner was in trouble, and he is. 2 police officers just arrested him, and I'm afraid they're going to hurt him. Another pause, longer this time. Rachel could hear muffled conversation in the background. Miss Miller, please hold for General Whitaker. The seconds stretched into an eternity. Rachel leaned against the bathroom wall, hardly able to believe this was actually happening. Then a deep, authoritative voice filled her ear. This is General Harold Whitaker. You have information about Sergeant Elijah Turner? In Washington, D.C., retired General Harold Whitaker sat at his desk in a wood-paneled office overlooking the Potomac. At 72, his hair had gone silver, but his back remained ramrod straight, his blue eyes sharp as ever. He was reviewing, briefing materials for tomorrow's Senate Armed Services Committee meeting when the call came through. The moment he heard Eli Turner's name, everything changed. His expression shifted from polite interest to intense focus in an instant. Tell me everything, he commanded, already reaching for another phone on his desk. As Rachel recounted the events at the diner, Whitaker's jaw tightened. By the time she finished, he was on his feet, pacing the length of his office. Miss Miller, you did exactly the right thing. I want you to send me that video recording immediately. My aide will text you a secure number. Then I want you to go home and stay there. Do not discuss this with anyone else for now. Is that clear? Yes, sir, Rachel replied, relief washing over her. But what about Eli? Will he be okay? Sergeant Turner is one of the finest soldiers I've ever had the privilege to command, Whitaker said, his voice softening slightly. And I take care of my people. Always. After ending the call, Whitaker stood motionless for a moment, his mind 20 years in the past. The heat had been oppressive that day in 2003, dust coating everything as their convoy moved through the narrow streets of a small village outside Kandahar. Intelligence had reported Taliban movement in the area, but everything seemed quiet. Too quiet. The first RPG hit the lead vehicle without warning. The second took out the rear. They were boxed in, taking fire from rooftops and windows on all sides. Whitaker, then a colonel, had been thrown from the Humvee, his leg pinned beneath the burning vehicle. He'd given the order for his men to fall back, to save themselves, but Staff Sergeant Elijah Turner had refused. No man left behind. "Sir," Turner had said, his young face streaked with blood and grime. "Not today. Not ever." Under relentless enemy fire, Turner had organized a counterattack, creating enough of a distraction to free Whitaker and carry him to safety. Then he'd gone back, rescuing 3 more wounded soldiers before the air support arrived. Now, Whitaker picked up his secure line and dialed a number from memory. "This is General Whitaker. Authorization code, Sierra Echo 94 Alpha." A pause. "I need an immediate intervention at the Riverbrook Police Department in..." He checked his computer. "Western Pennsylvania. One of our decorated veterans is being held there under questionable circumstances. I want DoD Internal Affairs on site within the hour." He made 5 more calls in rapid succession, to his contacts at the Department of Justice, to the Secretary of Defense's office, to an old friend who now headed the Veterans Affairs Administration. "It's about Eli Turner," he said each time. And each time strings were pulled, favors called in, wheels set in motion. The system that had failed Eli Turner for years was now being activated at its highest levels to protect him. In the holding cell of the Riverbrook Police Station, Eli sat with his eyes closed, his breathing measured and even. The concrete bench was cold beneath him. His ribs ached where Barnes had landed an accidental blow while escorting him inside. But his mind was somewhere else entirely. He'd learned meditation during his recovery at Walter Reed. The doctors called it a coping mechanism for his PTSD. Eli simply called it survival. In his mind, he walked the familiar corridors of a palace in Kandahar that his unit had secured, each turn memorized, each doorway noted. The mental exercise helped him stay present, stay focused, when the walls of reality threatened to close in. He didn't open his eyes when the door at the end of the hallway banged open. Didn't react when hurried footsteps approached. Only when the cell door clanged open did he finally look up. 2 individuals stood there, a man and a woman in crisp dark suits, each holding up a badge. "Mr. Turner," the woman said, her tone respectful. "You're free to go." Eli stared at them for a long moment, then slowly rose to his feet. "That was faster than usual," he remarked. "Special Agent Daniels, Department of Defense Internal Affairs." The man introduced himself. "This is Special Agent Morales. We're here at the direct request of General Harold Whitaker." A ghost of a smile crossed Eli's face. "The old man came through." "Yes, sir. He did," Agent Morales confirmed. "We've already spoken with the sheriff. You're being released immediately, with all charges dropped." They led Eli through the station, past the booking desk where Officer Barnes was arguing heatedly with the sheriff. "This is bullshit," Barnes was saying. "You can't just waltz in here with federal badges and..." He fell silent when he saw Eli walking past, flanked by the agents. "Officers Barnes and Kyle," Agent Daniels said coldly, "the Department of Defense will be conducting a full review of your arrest procedures and use of force against a decorated combat veteran. In the meantime, I suggest you both review the constitutional rights of citizens, regardless of their housing status." The sheriff, a heavy-set man with a perpetually worried expression, nodded vigorously. "I assure you, this incident doesn't reflect our department's values, agents. These officers will be placed on administrative duty pending a full internal review." Barnes's face had gone pale, while Kyle stared at Eli with naked hatred in his eyes. Eli paused briefly as he passed them. "The truth doesn't need force to stand," he said quietly. Then he continued walking, his back straight, his head high. Outside, the snow had stopped, leaving the world silent and white under the glow of street lamps. Eli breathed in the cold air, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. The DOD agents offered him a ride, but he politely declined. "I prefer to walk, but thank you." As the agents returned to their vehicle, Eli noticed a figure across the street, Rachel, huddled in a thin jacket, hopping from foot to foot in the cold. When she saw him, she hurried across, slipping slightly on the icy pavement. "You're okay," she exclaimed, relief evident in her voice. "I was so worried they'd—" She trailed off, glancing at the imposing black SUV with federal plates. "You made the call," Eli stated, not a question. Rachel nodded, pulling his dog tags from her pocket and holding them out. "I didn't really believe it would work. I mean, calling the Pentagon? It sounded crazy." Eli took the tags, his fingers brushing. Hers briefly. He slipped the chain over his head, the metal cold against his skin but comfortingly familiar. "It always works," he said, tucking the tags under his shirt. "Truth scares cowards. And General Whitaker always keeps his promises." "Who is he?" Rachel asked. "How does a general at the Pentagon know you by name?" Eli looked up at the night sky, where stars were beginning to appear between breaking clouds. "That's a long story," he said, "and not one for tonight." "Where will you go?" Rachel wrapped her arms around herself, shivering in the cold. "I have a place," Eli assured her. "Don't worry about me, but thank you for making the call, for believing me." Rachel hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out a paper-wrapped package. "Your dinner," she explained. "You never got to finish it. I had the cook wrap it up for you." Eli accepted the package with a nod of gratitude. Kindness is rare these days. Remember that. With that, he turned and walked away, his silhouette growing smaller against the snowy landscape. Rachel watched until he disappeared around a corner, then slowly made her way home, wondering what she had just set in motion. In Washington, General Whitaker was on his final call of the evening. "Ava, it's your godfather." "Uncle Harry?" Ava Washington's voice was warm with affection. "This is a surprise. It's not even my birthday. I need a favor, sweetheart. A big one. Name it." No hesitation. "I need you to help an old friend. His name's Eli Turner, and he's in a storm." Ava, a driven civil rights attorney who had made a name for herself taking on police brutality cases, sat up straighter in her chair. "What kind of storm?" "The kind that needs someone with your particular skills to navigate," Whitaker replied. "Pack a bag. I'm sending a car for you in an hour. You know I have court tomorrow. This is more important. This man saved my life, Ava, and now it's our turn to save his." There was a brief silence on the line, then, "I'll be ready." As Whitaker hung up, he looked at the photograph on his desk. Himself, much younger, standing beside Eli Turner and their unit in Afghanistan. Brothers in arms. "Hang in there, Sergeant," he murmured. "The cavalry's on its way." The morning sun cast long shadows across Riverbrook streets as a sleek black sedan pulled into the parking lot of the Pine Grove shelter. The worn brick building had once been a textile factory before being converted into a temporary haven for those without homes. 3 days had passed since the incident at the Red Rail Diner, and while the local police had gone unusually quiet, tension hung in the air like the threat of an approaching storm. Ava Washington stepped out of the car, her tailored navy suit and confident stride marking her immediately as an outsider. At 34, she'd built a reputation as one of the most formidable civil rights attorneys on the East Coast, specializing in cases of police misconduct. The daughter of a judge and goddaughter to General Whitaker, she moved through the world with the assurance of someone who knew exactly where she belonged. Inside the shelter's common room, Eli sat alone at a corner table, a steaming cup of coffee between his hands. His eyes tracked Ava the moment she entered, assessing her with the quiet vigilance that had kept him alive through 3 tours in Afghanistan and 5 years on the streets. "Mr. Turner," Ava approached, extending her hand. "I'm Ava Washington. General Whitaker sent me." Eli regarded her for a long moment before accepting the handshake. The general's moving fast. Usually takes the military a decade to respond to anything. A hint of a smile touched Ava's lips. Harry, General Whitaker, said you might be resistant to help. He also said you're too smart to turn it down when you need it. I've been handling my own problems for a long time, Ms. Washington, Eli replied, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. Not sure what a fancy lawyer from D.C. can do about small-town cops with attitudes. Ava set her briefcase on the table and took a seat. Those small-town cops with attitudes violated your civil rights, Mr. Turner, and based on what I've started digging up, you're not their first victim. She leaned forward, her voice dropping. This isn't just about what happened to you at that diner. This is about a pattern of abuse that's been going on in this town for years. Eli's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes. A spark of the same righteous anger that had driven him to rescue Whitaker under enemy fire all those years ago. I'm not looking to start a war, he said quietly. With all due respect, Mr. Turner, Ava replied. The war already started. You just happened to be on the front line. After a moment, Eli nodded almost imperceptibly. What do you need from me? For starters, your full story, and then I need to meet the waitress who recorded the incident. An hour later, Rachel nervously handed over her phone to Ava in the back booth of a coffee shop 3 towns over. She'd been jumpy since making the call to the Pentagon, convinced that Officers Barnes and Kyle would somehow discover her role in Eli's release. I have the full video from my phone, Rachel explained, her voice barely above a whisper. And I went back to the diner the next morning and downloaded a copy of the security footage too. My friend Mark works there and has access to the system. Ava raised an eyebrow, impressed. That was smart thinking. I kept thinking about what would have happened if I hadn't made that call, Rachel admitted. What they might have done to him in that cell when no one was watching. She twisted a paper napkin between her fingers. My brother Jameson is at the police academy. He wanted to be a cop to help people. I always thought, I never realized. Most officers do want to help, Eli said gently. It's the ones who want power you have to watch for. Ava spent the afternoon reviewing the footage, making notes, and building the foundation of a legal kiritu. By evening, she had started digging into the records of Officers Barnes and Kyle. Multiple use-of-force complaints, she told Eli as they sat in her motel room, papers spread across the bed. All dismissed. No disciplinary action taken. She held up a list. And these are just the ones that were formally filed. I'm betting there are dozens more that never made it to paper. Eli nodded grimly. People without homes learn quickly that the system rarely works in their favor. What's strange is that several complainants mysteriously disappeared or recanted, Ava continued, frowning at her notes. One man, Lloyd Jenkins, filed a brutality complaint against Officer Kyle last year. 2 days later, he withdrew it, claiming he'd been confused. A week after that, he apparently left town. No forwarding address. Or they made him disappear, Eli suggested quietly. Ava looked up sharply. That's a serious accusation. I've been on Riverbrook streets for 2 years, Ms. Washington. I've seen people vanish before. Ones who made too much noise caused too much trouble. He shrugged. Official story is always the same. They moved on, found better opportunities elsewhere. But when a man leaves behind his only possessions, his medication, he's not leaving by choice. As the evening deepened into night, Eli reluctantly shared his own backstory with Ava. His voice remained steady, but the pain behind his words was palpable. Sarah and I had been married 3 years when she got sick. Pancreatic cancer. Aggressive. The VA kept losing her paperwork, delaying treatments due to administrative errors. By the time they sorted it out, he trailed off, staring out the window at the darkness. After the funeral, I couldn't focus. Missed mortgage payments. The bank was quick enough then. No administrative errors when they wanted their money. Some company I'd never heard of bought the loan, and suddenly the payments doubled. Predatory lending, Ava murmured, making notes. Maybe. Doesn't matter now. Lost the house. Lost my job when I couldn't get to work anymore. PTSD episodes got worse. And here we are. Eli spread his hands. Just another homeless vet with a hard luck story. Except you're not just another anything, Mr. Turner, Ava said firmly. You're the man who saved General Whitaker's life, and now we're going to save yours." The next morning, as Ava continued her investigation, she uncovered something disturbing. A pattern emerged from email records she'd obtained through legal channels, references to a group called the Shieldmen. "It seems to be some kind of network within the police department," she explained to Eli and Rachel over lunch. "Officers who operate outside normal protocols under the guise of protecting the community from undesirable elements." Rachel paled. "That sounds like something from a bad movie. Unfortunately, it's all too real," Ava replied. "And based on these communications, both Barnes and Kyle are members, along with at least 6 other officers in the department, including Captain Broderick, who heads the Internal Affairs Division." "The fox guarding the henhouse," Eli muttered. Throughout the afternoon, Ava interviewed other unhoused individuals in Riverbrook. Their stories painted a disturbing picture: systematic harassment, unexplained injuries during arrests, belongings lost while in custody, and in several cases, people being transported miles outside town limits and abandoned in the middle of the night. They call it helping them move on to better opportunities. An elderly man named Frank explained, his weathered face a map of deep lines and old scars. "Happened to my buddy Thomas last winter. They picked him up for loitering outside the library. Next thing I know, they drop him 20 miles out with no coat in a snowstorm. Found him 3 days later, frozen to death in a drainage ditch." Each story added another piece to the puzzle. The Shieldmen weren't just corrupt cops. They were conducting a deliberate campaign to rid Riverbrook of anyone they deemed unworthy. When Ava attempted to file a formal complaint with the district attorney's office, she hit an unexpected wall. "I'm sorry, Ms. Washington," the assistant DA, a nervous young man named Alan Parker, told her. "But I can't accept these documents without proper authorization from local law enforcement." "That's not correct, and you know it," Ava challenged him. "A civil rights complaint can be filed directly with your office, especially when it involves allegations against the police department itself." Parker's eyes darted to the door, then back to Ava. "Look," he whispered, leaning closer. "You don't understand how things work here. These allegations you're making, they won't go anywhere, they never do." "Are you being threatened, Mr. Parker?" He straightened abruptly. "I think our meeting is over. Good day, Ms. Washington." That evening, Rachel burst into Ava's motel room, her eyes wide with fear and excitement. "My brother just called me," she said breathlessly. "Jameson. He wants to talk to you. He says he knows things about Barnes and Kyle. Things that could help your case." 30 minutes later, Jameson Miller sat across from them in Ava's room, his police academy cadet uniform neatly pressed, his young face a mixture of determination and terror. "Barnes beat a man to death 3 years ago," he said without preamble. "A homeless guy with schizophrenia who was having an episode outside the convenience store on Maple. They said he attacked Barnes, but the store owner's statement didn't match the official report." "How do you know this?" Ava asked, recording the conversation with Jameson's permission. "Captain Broderick uses these stories as training examples for cadets from Riverbrook," Jameson explained. "Unofficial sessions, off the record. He calls it the real education, how to write reports that protect the department while serving justice. That's how he phrases it." "And the dead man's name?" Ava asked. "David West. The report calls it death by misadventure," Jameson replied. "But I heard Barnes bragging about it at a barbecue last summer. Called it taking out the trash." The next morning, Rachel was fired from her job at the Red Rail Diner. The official reason was excessive absences. But the truth quickly became apparent when her name was leaked online as the person who had recorded the confrontation with Eli. Local social media exploded with accusations. Rachel was anti-police, a traitor to the community, someone who sided with vagrants over law enforcement. Death threats filled her inbox. Someone threw a brick through her apartment window with a note. "Cop haters get what they deserve. They're trying to make an example of you," Eli told her as he helped board up her broken window that evening. "Intimidation is their first response. It means you've got them worried." Rachel wiped angry tears from her eyes. "I can't believe this is happening. All because I recorded something that actually happened? Because I didn't want them to hurt you? They always hit truth first, Eli said, hammering a nail with precise measured strokes. Then they lose. Later that night, as Ava returned to her motel from a late dinner, a pickup truck swerved toward her on the otherwise empty road. She jerked the wheel hard, barely avoiding a collision as the truck roared past, its occupants shouting obscenities. When she reached her room, she found the door ajar, the place ransacked, her laptop missing. "This isn't just about intimidation anymore," she told Eli when he arrived in response to her urgent call. "They're actively trying to silence us." Eli surveyed the destroyed room with the calm assessment of a combat veteran. "Then it's time we fight back. Not their way. Our way." "What did you have in mind?" Ava asked. "I need to make a phone call," Eli replied. "To an old friend who specializes in unconventional warfare." The next morning, Eli stood at a payphone outside a gas station on the edge of town. He'd insisted on using a landline rather than a cell phone, old habits of operational security dying hard. He dialed a number from memory and waited. "Q's Tech Haven," a cheerful voice answered. "We fix what others can't. How can I help?" "The Eagle needs new talons," Eli replied, using a recognition phrase from their service days. A beat of silence, then, "Turner? Is that really you, man?" "It's me, Q, and I need your help." Quincy Q. Morales had been the communications specialist in Eli's unit, a technical genius who could make radio signals reach through mountains and jury-rig satellite uplinks from scrap metal. An IED had taken both his legs below the knee 6 months before their tour ended, but it hadn't diminished his skills or his spirit. Eli had carried him 3 miles to an extraction point while under enemy fire, refusing to leave him behind even, as Q begged him to save himself. "Where are you?" Q asked, his tone immediately shifting to business. "Riverbrook, Pennsylvania. Small town with big problems." "I know it. That place has been on my radar for a while now. Local police have an unusually high rate of use of force incidents against homeless individuals." Q's keyboard clicked rapidly in the background. "Give me 6 hours. I'll bring the cavalry." True to his word, 6 hours later, a modified van with the logo Q's Tech Haven painted on the side pulled into the parking lot of Ava's new motel. She'd switched locations after the break-in, using cash and a pseudonym to secure the room. Q rolled his wheelchair down the vehicle's ramp with practiced ease. At 38, he retained the upper body strength of the soldier he'd once been, his arms corded with muscle beneath his worn Batman t-shirt. Behind him came 3 other individuals, 2 men and a woman, each carrying specialized equipment in heavy cases. Eli met them outside, and the reunion hit him with unexpected emotion. He and Q clasped forearms in the grip they'd used in Afghanistan, both men's eyes suspiciously bright. "Still getting into trouble, I see," Q said with a grin. "Still pulling me out of it, I hope," Eli replied. Inside the motel room, introductions were made. Besides Q, the team consisted of Marcus Ghost Wilson, a former intelligence analyst with a particular talent for digital forensics; Brianna Trace Hamilton, an ex-military police officer who specialized in counterintelligence; and Jordan Link Peterson, a cybersecurity expert who had worked for the NSA before opening his own security firm. "We run a legitimate tech business," Q explained to a somewhat overwhelmed Ava and Rachel, "but we also operate a non-profit on the side, unofficial support for veterans who fall through the cracks of the system, especially when they're being targeted by corrupt authorities." "Is that legal?" Rachel asked hesitantly. Trace smiled. "We operate in gray areas, but we never break the law. We just find information that's already there, waiting to be discovered." "We're digital archaeologists," Link added. "We dig up buried secrets. And in my experience," Ava said, her legal mind quickly adapting to the new allies, "evidence is admissible regardless of how embarrassing it might be for the perpetrators, as long as it was legally obtained." "Exactly," Q nodded. "Now, let's talk strategy." Within hours, Q's team had converted the motel room into a command center. Multiple laptops were networked together, specialized equipment monitored police band radio, and Ghost had even managed to tap into the traffic camera feed covering most of downtown Riverbrook. First priority is establishing secure communications, Q explained, as he handed out encrypted phones to everyone. These can't be tracked or tapped. Use them exclusively from now on. Second, Trace continued, we need to map the network of corruption. Who's connected to whom? Who gives the orders? Who carries them out? And third, Link added, we follow the money. Corruption this systematic usually has financial motives somewhere in the chain. As the technical team set up their equipment, Eli brought Rachel aside. This might get dangerous, he warned her. You don't have to stay involved. Rachel straightened her shoulders. They threatened me, destroyed my reputation, and tried to run Ms. Washington off the road. I'm already involved and I'm not backing down now. Eli nodded, recognizing the same determination he'd seen in young soldiers facing their first combat mission. Just be careful. These people play dirty. Over. The next 3 days, Q's team worked tirelessly, piecing together the digital footprint of the Shieldmen. They intercepted emails, analyzed police reports, and cross-referenced incidents against official records. We found something, Ghost announced on the evening of the third day. Encrypted payments made to several Riverbrook police officers, including Barnes, Kyle, and Captain Broderick. Source? Eli asked, peering over Ghost's shoulder at the screen. A private defense contractor called Falcon Corps, Ghost replied. They've been making regular transfers through a series of shell companies. The amounts range from $2,000 to $5,000 per month depending on the officer's rank. What's Falcon Corps' business? Ava asked, already taking notes. Trace pulled up another screen. Officially, they provide security consulting and equipment to law enforcement agencies across the country. Unofficially, she trailed off, frowning at her display. This is interesting. They've been buying up property all over Riverbrook and the surrounding areas through subsidiary companies. Properties where? Eli pressed. Link tapped rapidly on his keyboard, then turned his screen to show a map of Riverbrook with dozens of highlighted locations. Mostly in what used to be working-class neighborhoods, areas with high concentrations of rental properties and public housing, and areas with high concentrations of homeless encampments, Eli added grimly. They're gentrifying, and we're in the way. While Q's team continued their digital investigation, Ava began interviewing other homeless veterans in the area. Their stories formed a disturbing pattern that matched what they were discovering through the data. They targeted us specifically, explained a woman named Diane Miller, who had served as a military nurse in Iraq. Police would show up at our campsites, confiscate our belongings for health and safety violations, and tell us to move on. If we refused, they'd arrest us on trumped-up charges. Did they ever mention where they wanted you to go? Ava asked. They'd tell us to head to Maplewood or Grantsville, Diane replied, naming towns over 20 miles away. Said they had better services for veterans there. But when we'd arrive, we'd find those towns had even stricter anti-camping ordinances and no shelter space. With each interview, the picture became clearer. A coordinated effort to push the homeless population, particularly veterans, out of Riverbrook entirely. Meanwhile, Officer Jameson Miller had agreed to wear a wire during his training sessions with Captain Broderick. The risk was enormous, but Jameson was determined to expose the corruption that had infiltrated the profession he'd once idealized. Remember, Ava cautioned him before he left for the station, don't push for information. Just listen and respond naturally. The more relaxed they are, the more likely they'll speak freely. Jameson nodded, nervously adjusting the nearly invisible wire beneath his uniform shirt. I understand. I won't let you down. The recording he brought back that evening exceeded their expectations. Not only had Kyle and Barnes openly bragged about cleaning out trash and getting bonuses for every bust, but Captain Broderick had explicitly mentioned the arrangement with Falcon Corps. The company needs these properties clear by end of quarter, Broderick had told the cadets during an unofficial briefing. Every vagrant you remove puts money in the city's pocket, and ours. It's a win-win. But what about those who won't go? A cadet had asked. That's why we have the holding cells in the old warehouse, Broderick had replied casually. Sometimes people need extra persuasion to understand they're not welcome here anymore. Rachel, who had been quietly supporting the team's efforts while searching for a new job, suggested a different approach to bring public attention to the situation. People respond to faces, to real stories, she explained. What if we created short videos about the veterans being targeted, humanize them, show their service, their struggles, and how they're being treated now? With Q's technical assistance, Rachel began filming mini-documentaries featuring willing veterans. She edited them carefully, contrasting their honorable service with their current treatment by Riverbrook authorities. The first video featuring Eli's story was uploaded to social media platforms on a Thursday evening. By Friday morning, it had over 1 million views. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Local news stations picked up the story. National veterans organizations issued statements of support. Justice for Eli began trending on social media. The pressure forced Judge William Harmon, who had expunged multiple excessive force complaints against the Shieldmen, to agree to a meeting with Ava. Under careful questioning, and with the implied threat of exposure, the judge revealed a disturbing truth. Broderick has files on everyone, he admitted, his hands trembling as he poured himself a third whiskey. He calls them cop files, dirt on judges, council members, business owners, anyone who might oppose him. He threatened to expose an affair I had years ago, said my family would be destroyed. So you buried the complaints, Ava stated flatly. I did what I had to do to protect my family, the judge whispered. God help me. With each new piece of evidence, the team refined their plan to expose Broderick and the entire Shieldmen network. They would use live-stream testimony, hidden surveillance, and media attention to force accountability. We need to move quickly, Eli warned during their strategy session. The more pressure we apply, the more desperate they'll become. His words proved prophetic. That same afternoon, as Rachel left the motel to pick up lunch for the team, a police cruiser pulled alongside her. Officer Kyle stepped out, his face twisted in a mockery of a smile. Rachel Miller, he said, you're under arrest for interference with police business and tampering with evidence. That's ridiculous, Rachel protested, backing away. I haven't tampered with anything. Your video says otherwise, Barnes added, emerging from the driver's side. Get in the car, now. Despite her protests, despite the broad daylight and the busy street, the officers forced Rachel into the cruiser and sped away. The abduction was captured by a traffic camera that Q's team had hacked into. Within minutes, Eli was organizing a response. They won't take her to the station, he said, his voice calm but his eyes blazing with controlled fury. That would be too public now with all the attention. They'll take her to their off-the-books location, the warehouse Broderick mentioned. Using the city's camera network, Q's team tracked the cruiser's movements to an abandoned industrial area on the outskirts of town. The vehicle disappeared into a dilapidated warehouse complex that had once housed a furniture manufacturing business. I need 4 volunteers, Eli said, his military training taking over as he formulated a rescue plan. Former combat veterans preferred. This is going to be dangerous, but we do this by the book. No weapons, no excessive force. Our job is extraction only. Get Rachel out safely. Within an hour, Eli had assembled a team of 5 veterans, each with specialized skills from their military service. They approached the warehouse complex from different directions, using hand signals and encrypted radio communications to coordinate their movements. Using thermal imaging equipment borrowed from Q's tech arsenal, they located 2 heat signatures in a small outbuilding, one seated and stationary, likely Rachel, and one moving around the confined space, presumably a guard. Eli led the approach, moving with the silent precision that had made him a legendary squad leader in Afghanistan. At his signal, 2 veterans created a diversion at the main entrance, while Eli and the remaining 2 approached the outbuilding from the rear. The lock on the door was simple, quickly defeated by one of Eli's team. Inside, they found Rachel tied to a chair, a bruise forming on her cheek but otherwise unharmed. Officer Barnes sat nearby, seemingly waiting for further instructions. The officer reached for his weapon, but Eli moved faster. With a single, precise strike, the same technique he'd used to disarm insurgents in close-quarter combat, he knocked Barnes unconscious. Are you hurt? Eli asked Rachel as he quickly untied her restraints. She shook her head, adrenaline and relief making her voice tremble. I'm okay, They were waiting for Broderick to arrive. They kept asking about the evidence we've collected. They helped her to her feet. Rachel pulled a small recording device from her shoe. "I never stopped recording," she said with a shaky smile. "Not since they grabbed me." Eli's team melted away from the warehouse complex as quickly as they had arrived, leaving Barnes unconscious but unharmed. By the time police reinforcements arrived in response to the disturbance at the main entrance, Rachel was safely back at the motel, surrounded by the team and already reviewing the damning audio she'd captured. "They admitted everything," she said, her voice steadier now as determination replaced fear. "Kyle said, and I quote, 'No one's gonna believe a junkie or some homeless war freak. We bury people like that.'" Ava's expression was grim, but satisfied, as she listened to the recording. "This, combined with everything else we've gathered, is enough to bring this whole corrupt system down." Eli nodded, his eyes meeting Q's across the room. "Then let's bury them instead." The morning after Rachel's rescue, tension and determination filled the air in the makeshift command center. Eli sat quietly in a corner, watching as Q's team huddled around a laptop, the audio file from Rachel's recording playing for the third time. "No one's gonna believe a junkie or some homeless war freak. We bury people like that." Kyle's voice, clear and unmistakable, echoed through the room. The casual cruelty in his tone made Rachel flinch despite herself. The bruise on her cheek had darkened overnight, a purple testament to what she'd endured. "This is solid gold," Q said, adjusting his wheelchair to face the group. "Combined with Jameson's recordings and the evidence we've already gathered, it's enough to blow this whole operation wide open." Ava nodded, her legal mind already mapping out the case. "The explicit admission of targeting homeless individuals, especially veterans, constitutes a clear civil rights violation. Add the financial paper trail connecting Falcon Corps to the police department and we have the makings of a RICO case." "What matters now is timing," Eli said, his voice quiet but commanding immediate attention. "We need to move before they realize how much we know." The team worked through the morning, analyzing the data they'd collected. By early afternoon, Ghost emerged from his digital excavation with a breakthrough. "I've cracked into a hidden server," he announced, waving the others over to his screen. "It contains the entire Vagrant Suppression Initiative dating back 3 years. Internal memos, officer evaluations based on removal quotas, payouts from Falcon Corps. It's all here." Trace leaned closer, scanning the files. "This goes beyond Riverbrook. Look at these distribution lists. Multiple towns, coordinated efforts, Shieldmen chapters embedded in police departments across 3 counties. It's a nationwide scandal waiting to erupt," Ava breathed, scrolling through page after page of damning evidence. "They've been systematically targeting minorities, veterans, and activists under the guise of community stability, and Falcon Corps has been funding it all." "But why?" Rachel asked, still trying to process the scale of the corruption. "Why would a defense contractor care about homeless people in small towns?" "Property values," Eli answered grimly. "Look at the development plans in these files. Falcon Corps' subsidiary companies have been buying up properties in cleaned areas at bargain prices, then flipping them for massive profits once the undesirable elements are gone." The revelation hit Rachel hard. She'd witnessed the changing face of her hometown over the past few years, coffee shops replacing diners, luxury condos rising where affordable housing once stood, but had never connected it to the increasing aggression toward the homeless community. "My brother was part of this," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "He must have known." As if summoned by her words, there was a knock at the door. Q quickly switched the monitors to an innocuous screen while Eli moved to answer it, one hand discreetly reaching for the knife at his ankle. It was Jameson, still in his cadet uniform, but with dark circles under his eyes and a haunted expression on his young face. "I need to talk to my sister," he said without preamble. Rachel stepped forward, crossing her arms defensively. "What is it?" "Not here," Jameson replied, glancing nervously at the others. "Privately." Eli shook his head slightly. "Anything you need to say to Rachel, you can say in front of all of us. We've all earned that trust." After a tense moment, Jameson's shoulders slumped. "I'm sorry," he said, looking directly at Rachel. I should have spoken up sooner. I knew, not everything, but enough. Enough to know it was wrong. Then why didn't you? Rachel demanded. The hurt in her voice unmistakable. Jameson's eyes dropped to the floor. I was recruited right out of the academy by Broderick. He said I had potential, that I could go far if I understood how things really worked. His voice trembled slightly. Then he showed me a file. Pictures of you, your apartment, your daily schedule. He said, "Your career starts with loyalty. Cross us and your family pays the price." The room fell silent as his words sank in. Rachel's anger visibly deflated, replaced by a mixture of horror and sympathy. "Textbook intimidation tactic," Eli commented, though his tone was gentler than his words. "Use family as leverage." "I tried to protect you by playing along," Jameson continued, finally looking up. "But after what they did to you yesterday, I can't do it anymore. I won't be part of this." Ava stepped forward. "We can protect you both, but we need everything you know. Names, operations, locations, all of it." Jameson nodded grimly. "I'll tell you everything." As the day progressed, the pieces came together with alarming clarity. The SHIELD men operated as a shadow organization within multiple police departments, identifying and removing problem individuals to facilitate Falcon Corps' property acquisitions. Officers who participated received substantial bonuses, while those who questioned the operations found themselves marginalized or threatened. In the late afternoon, Eli excused himself from the group. He needed time alone to process what they'd uncovered, to prepare himself for what was coming next. He walked to a small memorial park downtown, where a wall honored fallen soldiers from the area. His fingers traced over a familiar name etched in the polished stone: Malik Johnson, his best friend, his brother in all but blood, who had died in the ambush in Kandahar, the same day Eli had saved General Whitaker. "This time, we make it count," Eli whispered to the silent stone. "This time we finish the mission." He was so absorbed in his thoughts that he almost missed the black SUV that drove slowly past the park entrance, the driver watching him with deliberate intensity. But the instincts honed through years of combat and survival kicked in. Something was wrong. Eli hurried back to the motel, arriving just in time to see several police vehicles with flashing lights surrounding the building. Officers in tactical gear were already entering the room where Q's equipment was set up. Staying out of sight, Eli called Q's encrypted phone. "They're raiding us," Q answered immediately, his voice tense but controlled. "Anonymous tip about suspicious computer activity. They're claiming we're hackers threatening national security." "Everyone okay?" Eli asked, watching as officers emerged with laptops and equipment. "They roughed us up a bit. I got a fractured arm when they flipped my wheelchair. Trace and Ghost are fine. They're taking our gear, but we prepped for this. Everything's been uploaded to secure servers they can't access." "Where's Rachel?" "She and Ava were out getting food when it happened. Link is with them. Jameson was here. They arrested him for interfering with police operations. Eli Broderick was leading the raid personally. This is getting dangerous fast." "Stay low," Eli advised. "I'll contact you through the backup channels." He ended the call just as a hand closed on his shoulder. Spinning around, he found himself face to face with Rachel, her eyes wide with fear. "They took everything," she gasped. "All our evidence, all Q's equipment." "Not everything," Eli assured her calmly. "Q's team planned for this. The raid just confirms we're on the right track. They're scared." Ava joined them, her expression grim but determined. "We need to accelerate our timeline. Rachel's next video needs to go live tonight. It has to show the raid, expose the Shieldmen, and lay out Broderick's connections to Falcon Corps." "Can we do that without Q's equipment?" Rachel asked anxiously. Link emerged from around the corner, a slim laptop under his arm. "Always have a backup," he said with a tight smile. "I was carrying this when the raid happened. It has everything we need." That night, working from a new location, a vacant apartment owned by one of Eli's veteran contacts, they finalized and uploaded Rachel's most powerful video yet. It detailed the raid, explained the Shieldmen's operations, and included edited, portions of the audio recordings that exposed Broderick's illegal activities. The public response was immediate and overwhelming. By morning, the video had gone viral, with millions of views and thousands of shares. Justice for Eli began trending nationally. Local news stations picked up the story, and by mid-afternoon, even national media outlets were covering the scandal. Ava's phone rang constantly with calls from state senators, investigative journalists, and civil rights groups offering support and resources. The movement they'd started was gaining unstoppable momentum. "It's working," Rachel said, amazed as she scrolled through the responses pouring in. "People are listening. They believe us." "Truth has power," Eli replied simply. "Especially when it's been buried for so long." The pressure was taking its toll on the Shieldmen. By evening, reports came in that Officer Barnes, now suspended pending investigation, had contacted Broderick with an offer to testify in exchange for immunity. "He's panicking," Ava noted. "They all are. When corrupt systems start to collapse, it's always the same. Everyone scrambles to save themselves." Eli nodded, but his expression remained troubled. "Which makes them more dangerous than ever. Broderick won't go down without a fight, and he'll eliminate anyone he sees as a threat." As if confirming his words, Q called with disturbing news. Barnes had been found dead in an alley behind the police station, an apparent drug overdose according to the preliminary report. "Convenient timing," Q remarked darkly. "Especially since the body was found without the wire he was supposedly wearing when he met with Broderick." "They're eating their own," Eli told Ava grimly. "The walls are closing in and Broderick is tying up loose ends." That night, after the others had finally succumbed to exhaustion, Eli sat alone by the window, watching the quiet street below. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. "It's Turner," he said when the call connected. "I need the old squad. All of them. I'm in the middle of something big, and it's about to get bigger." The voice on the other end was silent for a moment, then, "Just like forward base victory?" Eli's mind flashed back to their darkest days in Afghanistan. Surrounded, outgunned, but refusing to surrender. "Exactly like that," he confirmed. "We need eyes, ears, and boots on the ground, and we need them now." "Consider it done," the voice replied. "The old squad is coming." 3 days later, Ava stood at a podium in Riverbrook's community center, addressing a packed hall of citizens, reporters, and cameras, live streaming to a national audience. The town hall meeting she'd organized had drawn far more attention than anyone had anticipated, with people lining the walls and spilling out into the parking lot. "Today, we give voice to those who have been silenced," she began, her confident tone carrying to every corner of the room. "Today, we shine light on a darkness that has been allowed to grow within our justice system." In the front row sat Eli, Rachel, and Jameson, along with several other victims of the Shieldmen's targeting. Q and his team managed the technical aspects of the event from a control room they'd set up in the back. Over the past weeks, we have uncovered evidence of systematic civil rights violations against homeless individuals, particularly veterans, in Riverbrook and surrounding communities, Ava continued. "This isn't about isolated incidents or a few bad officers. This is about an organized effort to criminalize poverty for the financial benefit of private interests." As she spoke, screens behind her displayed documents, emails, and financial records, all carefully selected to build an irrefutable case against the Shieldmen and Falcon Corps. Across town, Captain Broderick held his own hastily assembled press conference on the steps of the police station. Flanked by several officers, including Kyle, he presented a united front of righteous indignation. "These outrageous accusations are nothing more than an attack on law enforcement integrity," he declared to the small gathering of local reporters. "Elijah Turner is a dangerous, unstable vagrant with delusions of grandeur, manipulating public sympathy with false claims and doctored evidence." But Broderick's audience was dwindling by the minute, as reporters received alerts about the bombshell testimonies being delivered at Ava's town hall. One by one, they slipped away to cover the bigger story, leaving Broderick shouting his denials to an increasingly empty space. Back at the community center, Rachel took the podium, her voice steady despite her nervousness. "I grew up in Riverbrook. I've worked at the Red Rail Diner since I was 19. I always believed our police were here to protect all of us." She touched the faded bruise on her cheek. But when I saw Officers Barnes and Kyle assault a man for simply existing in a public space, when I heard them mock his military service, when they threatened me for trying to help him, I couldn't stay silent anymore. Jameson followed, his cadet uniform replaced by civilian clothes, his young face solemn with responsibility. "I joined the academy because I wanted to serve my community," he began. "Instead, I was taught how to target the vulnerable, how to falsify reports, how to be part of a system that valued property over people." His voice broke slightly. "I'm ashamed of my silence, but I refuse to be silent anymore." One by one, victims shared their stories. A mother whose teenage son had been beaten by Kyle for sitting on a bench outside their apartment complex after curfew. An elderly veteran forced to abandon his meager possessions when officers threatened him with arrest for illegal camping. A small business owner pressured to call police any time a homeless person lingered near his store. Each testimony built upon the last, creating a devastating portrait of systematic abuse and corruption. Finally, it was Eli's turn to speak. He approached the podium slowly, his posture military straight despite the weight of scrutiny. For a moment, he simply looked out at the crowd, his eyes finding each face, establishing a connection that television cameras couldn't capture. "My name is Elijah Turner," he began, his deep voice cutting through the silence. "I served 3 tours in Afghanistan as a staff sergeant in the United States Army. I received 2 Purple Hearts and a Silver Star for actions in combat. I watched friends die defending the freedoms we all cherish." He paused, letting his words settle. "When I came home, my wife was diagnosed with cancer. The VA lost her paperwork. Administrative errors, they called it. By the time they sorted it out, she was gone. I lost my house to predatory lenders. I lost my job when the PTSD made it impossible to function in a corporate environment. And when I had nowhere else to go, I became invisible, except to those who saw me as a problem to be eliminated." The hall was utterly silent, every person hanging on his words. "But I never lost my oath to support and defend the Constitution. Against all enemies, foreign and domestic. What we've uncovered here in Riverbrook isn't just about homeless veterans being harassed. It's about the corruption of the principles this country was founded upon. It's about justice being sold to the highest bidder." As Eli continued his powerful testimony, Q's team executed the final phase of their plan. They hacked into the Shieldmen's internal communication system, bypassing the security measures and accessing hours of recorded conversations and body camera footage that had never appeared in official reports. On giant screens throughout the hall, and on the live stream being watched by millions across the country, damning footage began to play. Kyle and Barnes using racial slurs while discussing vagrant removal, Broderick instructing officers on how to clean house before Falcon Corps inspections, officers laughing about planting evidence on troublesome homeless to ensure longer jail sentences. The audience gasped collectively. Several people began to weep. Others shouted in anger. In that moment, the Shieldmen's facade of respectability shattered beyond repair. By that evening, the Department of Justice had officially announced a federal investigation into the Riverbrook Police Department and the Shieldmen Network. Whistleblowers were offered immunity in exchange for cooperation. Ava worked tirelessly to ensure Jameson would be protected under these provisions. The local sheriff, desperate to distance himself from the scandal, placed Captain Broderick and Officer Kyle on administrative leave pending the outcome of the investigation. But by then, Broderick had already gone underground. "He's running," Q informed the team as they gathered in their new headquarters, a small office above a veteran-owned coffee shop downtown. "Our sources spotted him withdrawing large amounts of cash from 3 different banks yesterday. He's preparing to disappear." "Can we track him?" Ava asked, the legal prosecutor and her unwilling to let Broderick escape justice. "We're trying," Link replied, gesturing to his monitors where surveillance programs tracked credit card activities and traffic camera footage. "But he's being careful, using burner phones, cash only, staying off main roads." Eli exchanged a look with Q. "He'll contact Falcon Corps," Eli predicted. "He has too much dirt on them to be left hanging. He'll demand an escape route in exchange for his silence." "But will they help him?" Rachel wondered. "Or cut their losses?" Her question was answered the next morning when Officer Barnes was found, dead in an alley behind a bar frequented by police officers. The official story claimed an overdose, but when Ava's team arrived at the scene, they discovered his police wire was missing, and the positioning of the body suggested he had been moved after death. This wasn't an overdose, Eli stated flatly, after examining the scene. This was a hit. Barnes was going to talk and someone made sure he couldn't. Falcon Corps cutting their losses, Q agreed grimly. Broderick's next if they can find him. The team redoubled their efforts to locate Broderick before either Falcon Corps operatives or federal agents could reach him. Eli knew that Broderick's testimony would be crucial to exposing the full extent of the corruption and potentially to saving other lives targeted by the SHIELD men. It was at this critical juncture that reinforcements arrived. Samir, Wrench, Taleb pulled up outside their headquarters in a modified van filled with surveillance equipment. A master mechanic and drone technician during his service, Wrench had an uncanny ability to build or fix anything with moving parts. Deshaun, Echo. Rivers arrived next, his rental car unremarkable but his skills extraordinary. As the unit's intelligence and reconnaissance specialist, Echo could blend into any environment, extract information from the most reluctant sources, and disappear without leaving a trace. Finally, Clarissa Doc Holloway appeared carrying 2 large medical bags and the calm competence that had made her an exceptional combat medic. Now a trauma counselor specializing in PTSD, Doc brought both physical and psychological expertise to the team. The reunion of Eli's former squad was brief, but emotional. Tight hugs, firm handshakes, and the wordless communication of those who had faced death together. No explanations were needed. They had come because Eli had called, and that was enough. "Sit, Rep?" Echo asked, immediately shifting to operational mode. Eli laid out the situation with military precision, the corruption they'd uncovered, the evidence they'd gathered, the targets they were tracking, and the immediate objective of locating Broderick before he either escaped or became another accidental casualty. "We'll need full surveillance coverage," Eli continued. "Wrench, can you get eyes in the sky?" Wrench grinned, patting a custom case beside him. "Got 3 drones ready to deploy. High-altitude thermal imaging, encrypted feeds. Nothing moves in this town without us seeing it. Echo, I need you to tap your contacts in the private security world. Falcon Corps has to be using local assets for cleanup operations." Echo nodded. "Already on it. Got 2 names from old Blackwater buddies who've gone corporate. They're operating out of a motel on the north side. Doc, we may have casualties. Both Rachel and Q have already been targeted. We need medical support on standby." "I've got everything, from bandages to battlefield surgery," Doc assured him. "And I've set up connections with trusted medical staff at the county hospital if we need more. And I've been coordinating with my legal team in D.C., Ava added. We have federal prosecutors standing by and witness protection arrangements for anyone who needs it." Together, they transformed the small town into a fortress of truth and resistance. Veterans from surrounding communities, inspired by Eli's story and Rachel's videos, volunteered to serve as security for key witnesses. Local business owners, once afraid to speak out, now openly displayed support for the investigation. A network of safe houses was established. Communication protocols were implemented. The community that had once looked away from injustice was now actively working to expose it. 2 days later, Wrench's surveillance drone captured crucial footage. Captain Broderick sneaking into a private airfield outside town under cover of darkness, carrying a duffel bag that appeared to be filled with cash. "He's making a run for it," Echo confirmed after reviewing the footage. "That's a charter plane registered to a shell company we've linked. To Falcon Corps, scheduled departure is 0400 hours. Eli checked his watch. They had less than 3 hours. "This is our chance," he said, looking around at the determined faces of his team. Both old comrades and new allies united in purpose. "We end this tonight." "How do we play it?" Q asked, already pulling up the airfield schematics on his computer. "We could alert the feds," Ava suggested. "Have them waiting when he arrives." Eli shook his head slightly. "Too risky. If Broderick sees a police presence, he'll go to ground. And if Falcon Corps has inside connections with federal agencies, which we suspect they do, They might get tipped off. So what's the alternative? Rachel asked. Eli's expression was calm but resolute. I go in alone, one-on-one, me and Broderick. That's too dangerous, Doc protested immediately. He's desperate, probably armed. And I'm a combat veteran who knows exactly what I'm doing, Eli countered. Broderick doesn't want a confrontation. He wants escape. I just need to delay him until our federal contacts arrive. After heated debate, a compromise was reached. Eli would make the initial approach, with Echo providing sniper overwatch from a nearby hangar. Wrench would pilot drones to monitor the perimeter, while Doc and Q coordinated from a mobile command post half a mile away. Ava would have federal agents on standby, ready to move in on her signal. As the team made final preparations, Rachel pulled Eli aside. Be careful, she said, concern evident in her eyes. Broderick has nothing left to lose. Eli's expression softened slightly. People with nothing left to lose are actually the most predictable, he replied. They only have one goal, survival. I understand that better than most. He checked his watch again. It was time. The final confrontation awaited. The veterans' war on home soil was about to reach its decisive battle. The private airfield lay, quiet under a blanket of stars, a small island of concrete amid rolling farmland. A single runway stretched like a dark ribbon across the property, illuminated only by low blue lights that seemed to float in the darkness. The wind carried the scent of jet fuel and wet earth as Eli moved silently through the shadows, every sense heightened. Wrench status, he whispered into his comm unit. Drone shows one heat signature in the hangar office. Wrench's voice replied softly in his ear. Another approaching from the access road. Vehicle moving slowly, lights off. Likely our target. Echo, you in position? Affirmative, came the calm response. I have clear sight lines to both the hangar and the runway. If he makes any sudden moves, I can disable him non-lethally. Eli adjusted his position behind a fuel truck, giving himself a clear view of the small office attached to the main hangar. Inside, a figure moved restlessly, probably the pilot waiting for his passenger. Headlights briefly swept across the access road before disappearing. A car door opened and closed. Footsteps crunched on gravel, growing closer. Captain Broderick emerged from the darkness, a large duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Even from a distance, Eli could see the strain in his posture, the nervous way he kept glancing over his shoulder. The man was unraveling. Eli waited until Broderick was halfway to the hangar before stepping out of the shadows, directly into his path. Going somewhere, Captain? Broderick froze, his hand instinctively reaching toward his waistband where his service weapon would normally be. Don't, Eli advised quietly. My friends have you covered from multiple angles. This ends tonight, one way or another. Broderick's face, illuminated by the distant runway lights, twisted with contempt. Turner, I should have known. He let his hand fall away from his waistband. You just don't know when to quit, do you? I learned persistence in Kandahar, Eli replied, his voice steady as he maintained a careful distance. Where did you learn? To sell out your oath to serve and protect? Save the moral lecture, Broderick sneered. You have no idea how the real world works. Do you think anyone actually cares about homeless vets? About justice? It's all about money and power. Always has been. And that justifies targeting people who served their country, beating them, falsifying reports, driving them out of town like they're garbage to be disposed of? Broderick laughed harshly. You're a washed-up shell of what you once were, Turner. We provided a valuable service. The town improves. Property. Values go up. Everyone benefits. It's just business. You sent men to die for power, Eli replied, his voice low and intense. I watched them die for people. That's the difference between us. For a moment, they stood in silent confrontation. Two men representing opposite sides of a moral divide too vast to bridge. Then Broderick's expression shifted, a calculating gleam replacing the contempt. What do you want from me? Money? I've got plenty. He patted the duffel bag. Take half. Start over somewhere. A man with your skills could... I don't want your blood money, Eli cut him off. I want justice for every person you and your shield men targeted. Justice, Broderick repeated mockingly. There's no justice in this world, Turner, only winners and losers, and I don't intend to lose. With surprising speed for a man his age, Broderick reached into his jacket and pulled out a small pistol. But before he could aim, floodlights suddenly illuminated the airfield, temporarily blinding both men. Federal agents, drop your weapon, a voice commanded through a loudspeaker. In the confusion, Broderick swung his gun toward Eli, desperation overtaking reason. Echo's shot rang out from his position, precise, controlled, hitting Broderick's shoulder. The captain cried out in pain, his weapon falling to the tarmac. Within seconds, Federal agents swarmed the airfield, converging on their location with weapons drawn. Ava emerged from one of the vehicles, flanked by 2 senior agents. I thought. We agreed to wait for my signal, Eli said as she approached, though there was no real reproach in his tone. Plans changed when he pulled that gun, Ava replied. I wasn't about to let him shoot you. As agents secured Broderick and read him his rights, they cataloged the contents of his duffel bag. Nearly $500,000 in cash, 3 fake passports, and a flash drive that likely contained insurance against Falcon Corps' betrayal. Captain David Broderick, you're under arrest for civil rights violations, conspiracy, extortion, and attempted assault with a deadly weapon, the lead agent announced formally. You have the right to remain silent. Broderick, clutching his wounded shoulder, glared at Eli with pure hatred. This won't stick, he hissed as they led him away. Falcon Corps has people everywhere. Judges, prosecutors, politicians. You've started a war you can't win. Eli watched impassively as they loaded Broderick into a vehicle. The war started when you decided some lives were worth less than others, he said, though not loudly enough for Broderick to hear. And it ends when justice is served, no matter how long that takes. The federal investigation moved with unprecedented speed, largely due to the mountain of evidence Ava's team had assembled. 3 days after Broderick's arrest, a formal hearing was convened at the federal courthouse in Pittsburgh. The case had drawn national attention, with major news networks broadcasting live from outside the building. Inside the packed courtroom, Ava presented the complete Shieldmen case, hundreds of pages of abuse, collusion, and cover-ups. She used Rachel's footage, Q's data, and testimonies from victims across the country to paint a comprehensive picture of systematic civil rights violations orchestrated by police departments and funded by corporate interests. What we've uncovered is not just a local issue, she told the judge, her voice ringing with controlled passion. The Shieldmen network operates in at least 7 states, targeting vulnerable populations, particularly homeless veterans, to facilitate corporate land grabs disguised as community improvement initiatives. The judge, an imposing woman with decades of civil rights experience, listened intently as Ava laid out the case. When the hearing concluded, she issued immediate injunctions against all identified Shieldmen chapters and ordered a nationwide investigation into Falcon Corps' activities. In the days that followed, media attention intensified. Major news anchors conducted special reports on the scandal. Senate committees announced hearings. Public outrage swelled as more victims came forward with their stories. Eli found himself unexpectedly thrust into the spotlight. Veterans organizations requested his presence at rallies. Advocacy groups sought his endorsement. A prominent senator even called to personally invite him to speak before Congress. I'm not a politician, Eli told Q after declining the 3rd interview request of the day. I'm just a soldier who saw something wrong and tried to fix it. Sometimes that's exactly what people need, Q replied, looking up from his rebuilt computer system. Not politicians or celebrities, just someone who stands up for what's right, no matter the cost. The cost had indeed been high. Eli still had no permanent home, though a local veteran had offered him a spare room for the duration of the proceedings. His PTSD episodes had increased with the stress, leaving him sleepless and hypervigilant. And despite the growing support, he mourned for those who hadn't survived the Shieldmen's targeting, including his friend Thomas, who had frozen to death after being abandoned miles from town. Doc Holloway noticed his struggle. During a quiet moment at their temporary headquarters, she sat beside him, her medical training giving way to her counselor's intuition. You're carrying them all, she observed gently. Every veteran who didn't make it home. Every homeless person, targeted by Broderick. You can't save everyone, Eli. I know, he replied, staring at his calloused hands. But I'm still grieving for those I couldn't. That grief is important, Doc acknowledged. But so is recognizing what you've accomplished, what you've started, this movement. It's bigger than one town now. It's going to help thousands. After a long moment, Eli nodded. Sarah would have liked that, he said quietly, referring to his late wife. She always said my stubbornness would save me someday. She was right, Doc smiled. And now it's saving others too. The next morning, Eli received a formal request to address a joint congressional committee on veteran homelessness and police reform. Initially, he refused, still grieving, still preferring to work behind the scenes. But after heart-to-heart conversations with Doc and Rachel, he reconsidered. This isn't about you, Rachel reminded him. It's about using your voice for those who still don't have one. When Eli finally took the podium in Washington, D.C., his speech was fiery and powerful. Dressed in a donated suit, but standing with military bearing, he addressed the packed chamber with unflinching honesty. I stand before you not as a hero, but as a witness, he began. A witness to the suffering of those who served their country only to be abandoned by the systems meant to support them. A witness to the corruption that values profit over human dignity. A witness to the courage of ordinary people who risked everything to expose the truth. He called for comprehensive veteran housing reform, mandatory oversight for police departments, and legal protection for whistleblowers. He named those who had died on the streets, reading a list of 23 veterans who had perished in Riverbrook, alone over the past 5 years. Their deaths were not inevitable, he said, his voice thick with emotion. They were the result of choices made by individuals who decided some lives matter less than others, and choices made by institutions that looked the way rather than confront uncomfortable truths. When he finished, the room erupted in a standing ovation. Even cynical legislators who had initially attended only for the publicity were visibly moved. The committee chairman immediately called for emergency funding for veteran support programs and promised swift legislative action on police reform. Back in Riverbrook, changes were already taking place. The Red Rail Diner reopened under new management, the previous owner having been implicated in collaborating with the Shieldmen to report homeless disturbances. Rachel was offered her old job back, but she had found her calling elsewhere. I'm opening a non-profit cafe, she told Eli during a video call, her excitement palpable even through the screen. We'll employ homeless veterans, provide job training, and serve as a community hub for support services. Would you help me paint the walls when you get back? Eli smiled, a rare, genuine expression that transformed his weathered face. I'd be honored. Jameson, after providing crucial testimony against Broderick and several other Shieldmen, entered a rehabilitation program for the trauma he'd endured during his police training. Later, he joined Ava's team as a full-time investigator, using his inside knowledge to help identify and expose corrupt practices in other departments. The Falcon Corps scandal continued to expand. Their CEO was indicted on multiple federal charges. Their stock plummeted as investors fled. Class action lawsuits were filed on behalf of communities targeted by their gentrification schemes. And throughout it all, the movement that had begun, with a confrontation at a small-town diner, continued to grow. A grassroots campaign for dignity, justice, and second chances that transcended political divisions and united people across the country. One evening, exactly 6 months after the incident at the Red Rail Diner, Eli walked through the same snowy street where his story had begun. But now, instead of the worn military jacket and frayed pants, he wore a sharp charcoal suit donated by a veterans support group. His posture was upright, his gaze clear, his steps purposeful. As he passed a young homeless veteran huddled in a doorway, a man recently returned from overseas, still shell-shocked and disoriented, Eli paused. He knelt beside the young man, meeting his eyes with understanding few others could offer. I've been where you are, he said softly, extending his hand. And I can show you a way forward if you're willing to take it. 1 year after Eli Turner first walked into the Red Rail Diner, Riverbrook had transformed. The small town that had once systematically persecuted its homeless population now stood as a national model for veteran support and community integration. Large crowd gathered in the morning sunshine for the dedication of the Turner Veterans Community Center, a renovated factory building that now housed transitional apartments, mental health services, job training facilities, and a medical clinic specifically designed for veterans' needs. Q led the ceremony from his wheelchair, his health fully restored after the injuries sustained during the police raid. Children from the center's after-school program surrounded him, wearing T-shirts emblazoned with Veterans for Justice across the front. Today we celebrate not just a building, Q addressed the assembled crowd, but the birth of a movement. A year ago, one man refused to be silenced. Today, thousands stand with him, demanding dignity and justice for those who served. In the front row sat General Whitaker, now serving as a special advisor to the President's Commission on Veteran Homelessness. Beside him, Ava smiled proudly, her work on the Shieldmen case having culminated in landmark legislation named the Dignity Act, providing unprecedented protections for homeless individuals nationwide. Eli stood slightly apart from the crowd, uncomfortable with being the center of attention, but deeply moved by what his stand had accomplished. Children played freely in what had once been an abandoned lot, now transformed into a vibrant community garden. Veterans who had previously hidden in the shadows now walked openly through town, their service honored rather than exploited. After the ceremony, Rachel approached him, camera in hand. The past year had seen her transition from waitress to full-time documentarian, her powerful storytelling bringing human faces to systemic issues. "The premiere is tomorrow," she reminded him with barely contained excitement. "The theater's completely sold out." Her feature film, The Veteran Who Wouldn't Bow, chronicled Eli's story, Ava's legal battle, and the fall of the Shieldmen. It had already won awards at 3 film festivals and had been picked up for national distribution, ensuring that what had happened in Riverbrook would never be forgotten. "You'll be there, right?" Rachel pressed when Eli didn't immediately respond. "Wouldn't miss it," he assured her, though the thought of watching his life on screen made him deeply uncomfortable. "Your work matters, Rachel. It's keeping the pressure on systems that need changing." Her face softened. "I couldn't have done it without you." Across town, in a sleek office building that had once housed Falcon Corps' regional headquarters, Ava was launching a new initiative. Turner's Law would provide specialized legal support to wrongly accused or targeted homeless veterans, with particular focus on small towns where such abuses often went unchallenged. "We're not just fighting individual cases," she explained to her team of passionate young attorneys. "We're changing the culture. We're making it impossible for corruption to hide behind badges or boardroom doors." The impact of their work had already spread far beyond Riverbrook. In the past year, 11 Shieldmen chapters had been disbanded nationwide. 8 police chiefs had resigned or been indicted. Falcon Corps' predatory practices had been exposed in congressional hearings, leading to new regulations on corporate development in vulnerable communities. Doc Holloway, who had remained in Riverbrook after the initial crisis, opened a clinic specifically dedicated to PTSD recovery and mental health support for homeless veterans. She named it Malik's Hope in honor of Eli's fallen friend from Kandahar. "Trauma doesn't have to be a life sentence," she told her patients. "With the right support, even the deepest wounds can heal." Through donations and a community fundraiser, Eli now lived in a modest home near the Veterans Center. Though simple, it represented stability he hadn't known since before his wife's death. Large windows let in abundant light, and a small garden in the backyard gave him a sense of purpose and peace. On a shelf by his window, he kept a wooden box containing dog tags, not just his own, but those of veterans who had died on Riverbrook's streets before the Shieldmen were exposed. Each morning he acknowledged them, a private ritual of remembrance and renewal. One afternoon, as spring buds began to appear on the trees outside his window, Eli carefully added another set of tags to the box, those belonging to Officer Barnes. "Even monsters were once boys," he murmured, closing the lid gently. He had obtained the tags from Barnes's sister, who had reached out after learning the full story of her brother's involvement with the Shieldmen. The conversation had been difficult, but healing for both of them. A reminder that even in the darkest stories, humanity could be reclaimed. The ripples of change continued to spread. Rachel received a letter from a veteran in Texas. "I saw your film. I finally spoke out about what happened to me. The investigation starts next week. Thank you for being brave." Similar messages arrived almost daily now, from veterans finding their voices, from communities questioning their police departments, from ordinary citizens refusing to look away from injustice. What had begun as one man's stand for dignity had become a national conversation about who deserves protection under the law. At the local high school, Eli reluctantly agreed to speak to students about civic responsibility and moral courage. Despite his discomfort with public speaking, he recognized the importance of reaching young minds before cynicism and apathy could take root. "You don't need a uniform or a title to make a difference," he told the assembled teenagers. "You just need to recognize your own worth and the worth of every person around you." After his presentation, a troubled teen approached him hesitantly. "You think people like me can be heroes too?" the boy asked, his eyes downcast, his posture defensive in the way of someone who expected rejection. Eli regarded him thoughtfully. "You already are," he said with quiet certainty. "You just haven't heard your story yet." The last Shieldman chapter was officially disbanded on a crisp autumn day, almost 18 months after Eli's confrontation with Barnes and Kyle. Department of Justice reforms had been passed, implementing strict oversight for police interactions with homeless individuals and mandatory reporting of all use of force incidents. The Veterans Community Center received a national honor for innovation in social services. General Whitaker, watching the ceremony broadcast from his D.C. office, felt his eyes fill with unexpected tears of pride. The young sergeant who had saved his life in Kandahar was still saving others, in ways neither of them could have imagined. On a chilly evening in late November, Eli returned to the Red Rail Diner for the first time since his arrest. The place had been renovated, its atmosphere warmer and more welcoming under the new ownership. He chose the same stool at the counter where he had sat that snowy night nearly 2 years earlier. A young waitress approached with a coffee pot. "Can I get you something to eat, sir?" she asked with genuine warmth. "The special, please," Eli replied, the sense of déjà vu both painful and healing. When she returned with his meal, she set it before him with a smile. "It's on the house, sir. Thank you for everything you've done for our town." Eli started to protest, but the sincerity in her eyes stopped him. Instead, he simply nodded his thanks and began to eat. A simple meal made extraordinary by the context of how far things had come. After dinner, Eli made one final stop. At the newly completed memorial wall inside the community center, he carefully placed a framed photograph of Malik Johnson, his best friend who had died in the ambush in Kandahar. The photo joined dozens of others, creating a mosaic of lives connected by service, sacrifice, and finally, remembrance. Children ran past in the corridor, their laughter filling the air as a tutoring program wrapped up for the evening. Volunteers chatted as they prepared for the next day's job fair. A therapy group for veterans with PTSD shared coffee in the lounge, their faces reflecting both past pain and present healing. Eli rested his hand on Malik's photo, the glass cool beneath his fingers. "We're finally home," he whispered. The words meant for his friend, but encompassing all they had fought for, all they had lost, and all that had unexpectedly been gained. As he stepped outside into the fading light, Eli took a deep breath of the crisp evening air. For the first time in years, the weight of grief and rage that had driven him no longer pressed quite so heavily on his shoulders. In its place was something quieter but more enduring, a sense of purpose fulfilled, of wounds slowly healing, of peace hard-won but finally within reach. The sun set over Riverbrook, casting long shadows across streets that had once been battlegrounds and were now pathways to redemption. Eli Turner walked toward home, his steps steady, his head high, his heart at last beginning to find its way back to the light. What would you do if you witnessed someone being mistreated? Would you be brave enough to make the call that changes everything? If this story moved you, like and subscribe for more powerful tales of courage in the face of injustice.